Was the desert truly a graveyard, or a treasure chest overflowing with impossible dreams? Did a table made of solid gold ever truly grace a table in Damascus? And what if the greatest conqueror of all wasn't a warrior, but a spectacularly unlucky thief? The sun bled orange onto the ochre walls of Toledo, a city shimmering with a history nobody quite understood. It wasn't built, not really, it was found. A whisper in the wind, a rumor carried on the backs of Berber traders, spoke of a lost kingdom, a forgotten empire, Al-Andalus. And then, in 711, a handful of warriors, a storm of scimitars, and a whole lot of bewildered Visigoths changed everything. Let's start with Mūsā bin Nuṣayr. He wasn't your typical hero. Picture a man weathered like ancient sandstone, eyes that held the glint of 1,000 looted coins, and a reputation for, well, let's just say he had a talent for acquiring things. Not through righteous conquest, mind you, more like opportunistic acquisition. He'd raided Ifriqiya, a tangled mess of Berber tribes and shifting allegiances, and then, with a terrifying efficiency, sliced his way across the Iberian Peninsula. He wasn't interested in governance, just in the stuff. Ibn Ḥabīb, a meticulous chronicler from Egypt, tells the tale with a deliciously cynical flourish. He describes Mūsā's return to Damascus, a spectacle designed to impress the ailing Caliph al-Walīd. Mountains of gold, chests overflowing with jewels, slaves, hundreds, maybe thousands, all piled high, a testament to Mūsā's audacious success. The Caliph, a man known for his extravagant tastes, was thrilled. He took it all, of course. The Table of Sulaymān, a legendary artifact said to have belonged to King David himself, became the centerpiece of the Caliph's palace. It was a prize beyond measure, a symbol of the empire's power and wealth. But here's where things get delightfully messy. Al-Walīd kicked the bucket, and his brother Sulaymān, a man whose temperament was as dark as the deepest cave, took over. Sulaymān wasn't interested in admiring a golden table. He was interested in eliminating a potential rival. Mūsā, suddenly a threat, was promptly arrested, threatened with exile, and ultimately subjected to a rather unpleasant public humiliation. Ibn Ḥabīb recounts the scene with a grim satisfaction. Mūsā, a man who had amassed a fortune through cunning and, let's be honest, a bit of larceny, was left baking in the sun, his age and the heat taking their toll. He crumpled, he collapsed, he became a pathetic spectacle of wasted wealth. It's a brutal image, a stark reminder that even the most successful conquerors are vulnerable to the whims of power. Now let's switch gears to Ibn Abd al-Hakam, another Egyptian historian, who offers a slightly different perspective on the same events. He paints a picture of Mūsā as a ruthless, arrogant man who exploited his subordinates and plotted to establish an independent kingdom in the far west. He wasn't just a collector of treasures, he was a scheming rogue, a man who dared to challenge the authority of the caliphate. The contrast between the two accounts is fascinating. Ibn Ḥabīb focuses on the sheer extravagance of the conquest, the overwhelming wealth that flowed into Al-Andalus. Ibn Abd al-Hakam emphasizes the potential for rebellion and instability. Both accounts, however, agree on one crucial point: Al-Andalus was a place of immense wealth, a place that defied easy categorization. It wasn't a typical conquered territory. Unlike Ifriqiya, which had been slowly brought under Islamic control through decades of campaigns, or Al-Maghrib, which was embroiled in tribal warfare, Al-Andalus was almost immediately absorbed into the caliphate. It was as if the peninsula itself had been waiting, patiently, for a conqueror to arrive. The legend of the Table of Sulaymān certainly helped. The idea that a relic of biblical antiquity had been found in a forgotten corner of the Islamic world was irresistible. It legitimized the conquest, transforming it from a simple military campaign into a divinely ordained event. Suddenly, Al-Andalus wasn't just a new province, it was a link to a glorious past, a repository of ancient wisdom and forgotten treasures. But the wealth wasn't just symbolic. Toledo, the former capital of the Visigothic kingdom, was a treasure trove of Roman artifacts, manuscripts, and gold. The city's strategic location, its well-developed infrastructure, and its skilled artisans made it a valuable asset to the caliphate. Al-Andalus quickly became a center of trade, learning, and culture, attracting scholars, merchants, and artists from across the Islamic world. Yet beneath the veneer of prosperity and cultural exchange, tensions simmered. The new rulers faced resistance from the local population, who resented their foreign rule. The Berber tribes who had initially helped with the conquest soon grew restless and demanded greater autonomy. The Caliphate struggled to maintain control over this vast and diverse territory, and Al-Andalus remained a volatile frontier region for centuries to come. And then there were the slaves. Thousands of them, captured in the battles, were brought to Al-Andalus, where they were sold into servitude. Their stories, largely lost to history, are a testament to the brutality of conquest and the exploitation of human beings. Some were skilled artisans, musicians, and scholars, contributing to the cultural vibrancy of the city. Others were forced to work as laborers, domestic servants, or even gladiators. The presence of these slaves, representing a diverse range of ethnicities and cultures, created a complex and often contradictory social environment. They were both a source of wealth and a symbol of oppression, a reminder of the human cost of conquest. Let's delve into the fascinating world of Islamic law and its interpretation of slavery in Al-Andalus. Islamic law, based on the Quran and the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad, generally prohibited the enslavement of Muslims. However, non-Muslims were often captured in warfare and could be enslaved. The legal status of slaves varied depending on their skills, their ethnicity, and their master's wishes. Some slaves were granted certain rights and privileges, while others were treated as property. The legal framework surrounding slavery in Al-Andalus was complex and often contradictory. The Caliphate attempted to regulate the slave trade and protect the rights of slaves, but these efforts were often undermined by the realities of the marketplace. Slaves were bought and sold, traded, and sometimes even betrothed. The question of whether to free slaves became a recurring theme in Islamic jurisprudence. Some scholars argued that slaves should be freed upon reaching a certain age or fulfilling certain conditions. Others believed that freeing slaves was a charitable act, but not a religious obligation. The practice of manumission, freeing slaves, was common in Al-Andalus, and many former slaves rose to positions of prominence in society. But what about the women? The stories of female slaves in Al-Andalus are even more elusive. Historical sources provide scant information about their lives, their experiences, and their roles in society. However, it is likely that female slaves were subjected to the same forms of exploitation and abuse as their male counterparts. Some female slaves were forced into prostitution, while others were used as domestic servants or laborers. The legacy of slavery in Al-Andalus is a dark and troubling one. It is a reminder of the brutality of conquest and the enduring impact of colonialism. The scars of slavery are still visible today in the cultural diversity of the region and in the ongoing struggle for social justice. Moving beyond the grand narratives of conquest and wealth, let's consider the everyday lives of the people who lived in Al-Andalus. The peninsula was a melting pot of cultures, languages, and religions. Arabic, the language of the Caliphate, gradually replaced Latin as the lingua franca of the region. However, many of the local populations continued to speak their native languages, such as Basque, Galician, and Mozarabic, a Romance language spoken by Christians in Al-Andalus. The architecture of Al-Andalus is a testament to this cultural fusion. Mosques, palaces, and bathhouses were built in a style that combined Islamic and Roman elements. The intricate geometric patterns, the delicate arches, and the lush gardens of Al-Andalus are a visual reminder of the region's unique history. The cuisine of Al-Andalus was equally diverse, reflecting the blending of Arab, Berber, and Iberian culinary traditions. Dishes such as paella, gazpacho, and sherry originated in the region. Religious life in Al-Andalus was complex and often fraught with tension. Muslims, Christians, and Jews coexisted in the region for centuries, but they were often subject to discrimination and persecution. The Umayyad Caliphate initially granted religious tolerance to its subjects, but this policy gradually eroded as the dynasty weakened and the frontier regions became more turbulent. The relationship between the three religious communities was not always peaceful. There were frequent conflicts between Muslims and Christians and between Muslims and Jews. The Almoravid and Almohad dynasties, which succeeded the Umayyads in the 12th century, imposed a stricter interpretation of Islamic law and persecuted the non-Muslim population. The Reconquista, the Christian reconquest of the Iberian Peninsula, began in the 8th century and continued for centuries. The Christian kingdoms of northern Spain gradually pushed southward, reclaiming territory from the Muslim rulers. The final Christian victory came in 1492, when Granada, the last Muslim stronghold in Spain, fell to the Catholic monarchs Ferdinand and Isabella. The fall of Granada marked the end of Al-Andalus as a distinct political and cultural entity. However, the legacy of Al-Andalus continued to shape the history and culture of Spain and Portugal. The region's rich artistic and intellectual heritage, its unique architectural style, and its diverse population left an indelible mark on the Iberian Peninsula. But what does it all mean? Al-Andalus was a place of contradictions, a space where the old and the new, the familiar and the foreign, collided and merged. It was a place of wealth and poverty, of power and oppression, of tolerance and persecution. It was a place that defied easy categorization, a place that continues to fascinate and challenge historians and scholars today. Looking back, the story of Al-Andalus is not just a story of conquest and colonization. It's a story of cultural exchange, religious tolerance, and artistic innovation. It's a story of people from different backgrounds coming together to create something new and unique. And perhaps most importantly, it's a reminder that history is not a fixed narrative, but a complex and ever-evolving interpretation of the past. So as the sun sets over the ruins of Toledo, casting long shadows across the ancient streets, what remains? A lost kingdom, a forgotten empire, or simply a collection of stories whispered on the wind, waiting to be rediscovered? And if Mūsā be? Nuṣayr truly possessed a table made of solid gold. Where is it now? Does it still shimmer with its ancient splendor, or has it been lost to the sands of time? Perhaps the true treasure of Al-Andalus wasn't the gold or the jewels, but the memories, the stories, and the cultural legacy that it left behind. But one final question: if you could travel back in time and witness the conquest of Al-Andalus firsthand, what would you want to see?